The title of this video is, with relation to the Woodford Tax, is does economics know what interest is? And by interest, I mean what economics understands to be the rent for money. Those to whom all wealth accumulates lend their money to their governments and to some of us schlubs. But they don't lend it for free, they charge interest. Well, there is an 18 trillion, at the moment this is being shot, which is November 2020, there's currently an $18 trillion bond market, 18 trillion notional in bonds that have negative yields. So those have negative interest, but typically loans or bonds have positive nominal interest. And I would just start with the Mark Twain. There's a famous quote by Mark Twain, which is, it's not what you don't know that gets you into trouble, it's what you know for sure that just isn't so. So, my name is Scott Solomon. I am the discoverer of the Woodford Tax. The Woodford Tax is a global wealth tax, an N% a year global wealth tax with the very strange design feature that the taxed, which are the 0.5% of the world's wealthy, and corporations and foundations with net assets above some level to be determined, only owe 1/3 the tax amount if they pay the tax with bank loans. Now, in May 2018, I got to spend 2 weeks in Spain, and I spent 2 days in Salamanca, Spain. Salamanca, Spain is home to what I believe is the third oldest university in Spain, University of Salamanca, where the Spanish writer Cervantes attended University of Salamanca. They were having the 800th anniversary of the university. And this, being there during the 800th anniversary of the University of Salamanca, made me think of something strange. Suppose you had a teleporting time machine and you could travel back in time, teleporting anywhere in the world back in time to all these old universities when they were first getting started, or various periods. And you could, let's just say for fun, you could sit in on classes at these universities. So you could go back and sit in on a class in astrophysics before Kepler. Before Kepler, they thought planets went around the sun in a circular orbit, but Kepler discovered it was an elliptical orbit. So people say astrophysics classes before Kepler, in theory, were taught that the planets revolved around the sun in a circular fashion. Or say you could take chemistry classes before Boyle, I don't know who it was, discovered the element phosphorus. Before chemistry had an understanding of what an element was, I believe there was still something resembling chemistry. And you could take classes, I assume, in chemistry before they knew what an element was. So why is this significant to today? Is, well, human civilization's only 15,000 years old. The vast majority of the human population has zero or negative wealth. So that's messed up, obviously. So as a thought experiment, you could ask yourself, well, is the human intellectual endeavor, economics, sort of like chemistry before the understanding of what an element was. Is it like physics before Kepler? Is it that screwed up? Well, what would make you and one way it would be that screwed up is if one of the fundamental components of the discipline is not understood, just like chemistry didn't know what an element was at one point. So you can imagine how screwed up chemistry was before they knew what an element was. So why would you think that? Well, all you have to do is you don't even have to go to a fancy university, but let's say you go to a fancy university, Columbia University. I live across the street from Columbia University. And you sit in on a Columbia University Principles of Economics. And in about lecture 3, they'll teach you that they'll model the labor market. And they'll show you that the labor supply curve, if you plot quantity on the x-axis and price on the y-axis, even though price is the independent variable and quantity is the dependent variable, they'll say that's a monotonically increasing curve. Usually they'll put it as linear. And that the labor demand is monotonically decreasing. And where the two curves meet is called equilibrium. And if you set a wage floor, which is a price level above the equilibrium, supply will be greater than demand, and you'll have needless unemployment, which is probably why most people only take one economics class in their life. They walk away with they probably walk away with two ideas. One, minimum wage bad, and rent control bad. But let's think, so they teach you that, and you're paying, these kids are paying $80,000 a year to attend Columbia, so it's not like they're getting taught that for free. So let's think about it for just a second. To quote the cowboy character from the David Lynch movie Mulholland Falls, or Mulholland Drive, I guess. If you have people working 40 hours, if you have, say, in some locale, there are 20,000 workers working 40 hours a week for $9 an hour, and they're barely subsisting. And then the next day you cut all their wages to $5 an hour. What would happen? Since they were barely subsisting on working 40 hours a week on $9 an hour, they would have to work a lot more hours because they're making less money per hour. And working a lot more hours means the supply of labor is increasing as the price falls. So that curve that they're charging kids $80,000 a year to learn this garbage. Basically, economics is teaching them garbage for $80,000 a year. That this labor supply curve, past some subsistence frontier, supply would increase as price fell. And as supply increased, presumably, if you got into some sort of a dynamic model, price would continue to fall. So by not having a minimum wage, you could argue that you would get into a downward wage spiral. And it's completely different than what they tell you in these classes. So I would compare that to like, say, a calculus class on the real line. If the first day in a calculus class they told you the graph for y equals x to the third is the same as y equals x squared. It's just it's just garbage. So how does that relate to the Woodford tax? Well, that will come in a subsequent video.